All right, so over the course of the weekend, it was announced that Chris Eubank Jr. parted ways with Wasman Boxing, so he's now a free agent. And I speculated that primarily in the UK, because that's obviously where Eubank Jr. is most well known, there will be UK promoters, the likes of Frank Warren, Ben Shalom, Eddie Hearn, maybe not Frank Warren, because I know him and Eubanks definitely don't see eye to eye. But there will be no shortage of promoters, I would imagine, looking to work with him. But when I look at everything on the surface, there's really nothing like in terms of big fights, there's really nothing there for Eubank apart from one Billy Joe Saunders. Because if you look at the middleweight division, it's not a massively stacked division. There's no real like major names there who you could do pay-per-view extravaganzas with or even pay-per-view events, which is what I would imagine Chris Eubank would be looking to do. Then you look at 168 and it's a very, very extremely tough division with much bigger guys who are very, very talented as well. So you kind of look and you think, right, well, if he goes to a different promoter or whoever one of the three main promoters in the UK are, like, what would he do? Who would he fight? Where would he go? And I think for Eubank Jr. at this point in his career, and I'm going to bring up Conor Benn because look, that fight right there, they tried to do it nearly 2 years ago. We all know what happened. I've no doubt in my mind Eddie Hearn would try and do it if Conor Benn could fight in the UK. But let's say the UK situation is dragged on. They want to do a big fight this year. They want to work with Chris Eubank Jr. Who else could you get? One answer, Billy Joe Saunders. But here's the problem. Billy Joe Saunders, we still to this day don't know. Now, I have 3 articles here. They're all from Boxing Scene except one. And they're all from last year. So, September the 30th, Billy Joe Saunders announced his return and date. So that was when he started talking about his return. October the 10th, Billy Joe Saunders excited for December return. Sorry, Eddie Hearn excited for December return of Billy Joe Saunders. That didn't happen. November, Billy Joe Saunders teases return on the undercard of Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn. Again, neither of those two things happened. So Billy Joe Saunders, throughout the course of last year, was teasing returns, talking about coming back at 175 pounds, teasing return on the undercard of Chris Eubank Jr., Billy Joe Saunders, or Chris Eubank Jr., Conor Benn, if in fact that fight happened, which it didn't. Once it became apparent that that fight wasn't going to take place, Eubank versus Benn, radio silence. Radio silence with Billy Joe Saunders. That was the back end of last year. We're now coming into May of 2024, and zip. Nothing. Nada. Not a peep from Billy Joe Saunders. Billy Joe Saunders now, how old is he? On Box Rec, it doesn't give his age. He was born in 1989. He's 34 years old, so he'll be going on 35 years old. Now, 35 years old for a heavyweight who's had a bit of inactivity, I wouldn't be advising it, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's the end of the world. Even for a cruiserweight, I would say probably not the worst thing in the world, but you want to get a move on. For a super middleweight like Billy Joe, who has lived a very unhealthy life, he's not lived the life of an athlete. It's really not good. And I was just thinking there, he's not lived the life of an athlete. He's a two-divisional, two-time world champion. And I still think that in his prime, Billy Joe Saunders, his alias is the Superb, and I think in his prime he was superb. A real waste of a talent. And I know you could say, gee, he was a two-division, two-weight world champion. How could he really be a waste of talent? Well, I think there was a lot more there. I actually think he should be a three-division world champion, to be honest with you, because I think that if you look at Billy Joe Saunders early in his career, he wasn't a middleweight, he was a 154-pounder. And he even alluded to that if he was more disciplined, he could have easily done 154. I think he could have picked up a title there. He could be talking about three-weight world champion of Billy Joe Saunders. He didn't do a great deal at middleweight. Obviously, he had the WBO title. He beat Andy Lee. Had that. Would you call David Lemieux a great win? A great performance against David Lemieux, which we all remember. Incidentally, that was his last fight at 160 pounds. You look at his resume and what jumps out at you on Billy Joe's resume is the inactivity. You know, it's like he gets the... Billy Joe is one of those fighters where he gets that good win that you think is going to catapult him, and then he just does nothing. He just does nothing. Beats Chris Eubank Jr. That was for the British title, I believe. Yeah, British and Commonwealth and European middleweight title. That was November 2014. It'll be 10 years this November. That's a quick 10 years. Scary. Does nothing. until the end of 2015, fights Andy Lee. Does nothing until, well, really 2017 when he fights Willie Monroe. He had that fight against Akabov. That was the debut of Ben Davison in the corner. That was in a leisure centre of all places. And actually in 2016 there was talk that he would have been fighting Willie Monroe in the undercard of Canelo versus Smith in Texas. That didn't happen, obviously. I think Billy Joe couldn't make weight or something for that. Then he has that great fight against David Lemieux. Great performance, I should say, against David Lemieux. And then again, what does he do? Well, he does nothing. Now, to be fair, he did have 2 fights lined up with Martin Murray. Both of them, I think, were going to be in the O2 in 2018. I think they definitely got out. I think they did get pulled due to poor ticket sales, as far as I believe. Then he fought Charles Ndamu. He was 178 pounds for that fight. That was a year later. Fights that Sefa Isufi guy. What's he done with his career lately? He was knocked out in 2 rounds in his... Well, actually, he was knocked out in 2 rounds last week. That's... Okay, knocked out in Munich by Ralph Venice. I think I say that guy's name. To be fair, since then he hadn't lost to anybody, but he hadn't fought. He beat Thomas. That's definitely a different Thomas Adamek. That has to be a different... Yeah, that's not the Thomas Adamek. That's a complete... I was looking at that like, no way did he beat Thomas Adamek. That Thomas Adamek, no, different Thomas Adamek. But yeah, he picked up that title at Stevenage's Stadium. Had that fight on the undercard of... Well, I know it's not officially... Oh, yeah, there it is there. Logan Paul versus KSI. Had that fight there. That was on the undercard. And it wasn't a great performance by Billy Joe. It wasn't a great performance against Martin Murray a year later. And then he did do a good performance against Canelo. Let's turn it into a career review, isn't it? Maybe I'll do a full-length one at some point on Billy Joe. But yeah, he fought Canelo 3 years ago. As near as makes no difference. Nearly 3 years ago. And since then, zilch. Nothing. Nada. Ain't heard a peep. All we've done is we've seen him looking way out of shape. Massively out of shape. 3 years of inactivity. No hints of retirements yet. Out of shape. God knows what he's been doing outside of the ring. God only knows. So when he comes back, if in fact he does come back, he's talking of coming back at 175. Good luck with that. I know 175, if you take Beterbiev and Bivol out of the equation, is not the strongest. Although saying that, now you've got the likes of Dave Morrell and Benavidez moved to 175. It isn't the strongest if you take those 2 guys out, but you add those 2 into the equation at 175, yeah, it's going to be a lot tougher to get any work done in that division. And even then, you have the likes of Callum Smith, Joshua Buatsi in there, who I wouldn't say I don't think they're as good as Bivol Beterbiev, nor do I think that they're as good as Morrell or Benavidez, or even Vodcek to that extent. But they're good enough and they're tough enough. I wouldn't be picking Billy Joe to beat them. Look at 170 or 168. You know, Canelo obviously is the guy there. You have Munguia moving up. I wouldn't pick Billy Joe over Munguia at this point. You also have the likes of Diego Pacheco, I think I say that guy's name. Even Berlanga. You know, I don't rate Edgar Berlanga, as you know. I think he is just an accident waiting to happen. And I think apparently he's WBA mandatory, if I'm not mistaken, for Canelo. So, yeah, he'll take a tremendous beating in that fight. It's just a case of when, not if he gets stopped. But I would still pick him over Billy Joe Saunders comfortably. And I think for Eubank Jr., him against Billy Joe, if I was Chris Eubank Jr., I'd be saying, look, well, let's do what we got to do. I'll have a fight on a match. I'll sign with Eddie Hearn on a 2-fight deal. I'll have a fight. Billy Joe can have a fight. And then we meet on a pay-per-view. There you go. Because that to me makes the most sense for both guys. Because both guys, I would imagine, know that they're unlikely to do anything at world level at this point in their respective careers. They probably just want to top up the funds. And I would watch that fight. I would make Eubank Jr. firm favourite to beat Billy Joe Saunders if they did have a rematch at this point. I always felt Billy Joe, if they'd done a rematch, say 6-7 years ago, or really probably up until he fought Canelo, I always would have made Billy Joe favourite going into a rematch with Chris Eubank Jr. But again, 3 years out of the ring, inactivity, out of shape, not living the lifestyle, and not living the lifestyle throughout his career. You know, I look at someone like Tyson Fury and I say, right, well, it's catching up to him now at 35, not living that lifestyle. But as a heavyweight, you can get away with that a little bit longer. Why? Because you're not having to make weight. You can have a really crap camp where you've come in out of shape. You could be fighting whoever, and you can get away with it. Because again, you're not having to take loads of weight off, overtrain to get all that weight off, artificially, drain yourself, stand on the scales, you're 160 and you look like, a you-know-what addict. You've done all that coming into camp out of shape, and then, okay, you're performing on fight night, you look terrible. You can get away with it at heavyweight because you're having to do all that. But you're not going to get away with it for very long. You're not going to get away with it for very long at heavyweight. And I think we're seeing that with Tyson Fury. You ain't going to get away with it for very long if you're having to make weight, which Billy Joe Saunders will still be having to do. So I think that if he does come back, because it wouldn't shock me if they announced that he's going to retire. I would have thought, though, if he was going to retire, he would have done it by now instead of waiting 3 years. But, it's Billy Joe Saunders. God only knows what. You wouldn't know what he'd do, to be honest with you. But if he does come back, I envision he is going to look horrendous. He's going to be a shell of himself. And whether you like Billy Joe or you don't like him, and yeah, Billy Joe does come across as a bit of a degenerate, you can't deny that in his prime, that's why I say wasted talent. I think there was so much potential there with Billy Joe. Such a talented fighter, such a brilliant boxer. But yeah, he wanted to. Billy Joe, when he trained with Adam Boot, one of the reasons why he left Adam Boot before they even had a fight together and went up to Sheffield to train with Dominic Ingle was, by his own admission, he was in London, he was close to his mates, and there was temptation everywhere. Temptation to eat, drink, and do God knows what. Went up to Sheffield, lived in Kid Galahad's attic, I think he said was where he was staying. And you saw the results. Billy Joe needed that. May need it again. Apparently he's with Ben Davison still. Look, Ben Davison's a good trainer, but there's only so much you can do. He ain't going to be able to do much of Billy Joe, I don't think, at this point in his career. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed the video, people. Smash the like button if you could. Subscribe, of course, as always, if you haven't already. Peace.